name is Ayaka, and I am a TA with LSAT Unplugged. And we're talking about essays. So, the last couple of weeks, Alyssa and I, we've taken people through like the journey of the essay from picking a topic to how to edit to how to figure out who is a good editor for your essay. We're in this last kind of sprint this week. Not that your essay journey is over, but just how to end up in a stick to landing is not that I've done gymnastics at all. I can't stick a landing. But just kind of getting there. So
I think it's really interesting. I'm laughing because I actually love how you mentioned like finishing an essay or how to know when you're done and like this metaphor of sticking a landing because that is how I feel right now in my essay writing journey. And the more I've done now, I just had my second interview with an admissions committee member of a law school. And something that keeps being said over and over again is to not rush the personal statement. And so I feel like I'm in the middle of my gymnastics move because I've been working on mine for a really long time. Sometimes people say that and they follow that up with, I've been working on it for a long time, for a month. And that's not a long time. So I've been working on mine for maybe, I hate to say like 6 to 8 months now. And so this idea that you've just said about like sticking a landing, I'm definitely interested in figuring out how to do that.
Yeah, and Alyssa, you were with me when we did our public session, and I think I said that your essay really should be taking around 6+ months to get through from like topic selection all the way to the final. And there was some pushback. They were like, whoa. So it is a process, it's a journey, and we want to make sure that you finish that journey strong. So sharing my screen, Anna has been kind enough to put the link in the chat as well if you would like to follow. It's not like mind-blowing stuff, so you don't need to see it really, but here we go. So essay writing, when to stop. And I don't mean stop in the middle of the process. What I mean is, stick the landing. So it really should be how to stick the landing. But anyway, I do want to back up a little bit. And, Alyssa and I, we always say we've been talking about essays for a really long time. And when I first started talking to Alyssa about essays, I was like, I really want to have a structured way to approach essays, a structured way to kind of look at essays objectively and not be too caught up in like what the topic is and the writing style and all that. So I really wanted to put up here our methodology that we use and that's always running in our mind of the stages of an essay. And a lot of this is obvious. But the first stage is really coming up with a topic, what's an appropriate topic, what is something that you can write about. And we had a lot of questions during our public session of like, is this topic too personal? Like, does it need to be a traumatic event? Like all that fun stuff that gets done in that first stage. Second stage, between the first and the second, we're looking at the first draft really. And this stage 2 is when we're refining the stories, right? Kind of saying, is this a necessary story? Is this paragraph moving that story forward? Am I getting a good picture of who I am in this essay as a whole? That's kind of where we're looking at structure. Do we need to flip the structure? Do we need to take things out? Do we need to add things in? These big editing moves. Stage 3, we're looking at more of the nitty-gritty content of like what's going on in the story. What are the threads that we need to pull in a story that needs to get tied in the end, in the conclusion, all of that fun stuff. And it starts bleeding into the stylistic choices that we're making in our essay. Stage 4, the deep polish. You're going to go line by line, word choice, grammar, spelling errors, tone, rhythm. Does it roll off your tongue right? All of that, like more aesthetically pleasing stuff that we're talking with our essays. And then stage 5, we really want to take a look at your application as a whole. If you have addendums, if you have diversity statements, does it make sense as an application of and a reflection of who you are? So this is really where we want to end up. We want to end up in stage 5, where we're looking at an essay. We've got it done. We're happy with this, and it makes sense in your application to a school so that it captures who you are and it's a reflection of who you are. However, Alyssa, please jump in if you disagree with me or even agree with me, but we do find that a lot of people ask us if they're close to being done when they're really in the stage 2, stage 3 process. Sometimes in the stage 4, but it's such a push to get from stage 1 to stage 2, which is that first draft. And they're kind of winded from that. And so they do a couple edits and then they're like, oh, okay, am I done? Which
I think the lift, and it's a cool evening here in Texas. So I have all my doors and windows open. So please let me know if traffic's too loud and I need to shut them. But I think what you're describing is something I've seen. I'm trying to figure out, there's only 2 people. I've seen over 100 essays, and there's only 2 people off the top of my head, and forgive me if I'm forgetting you, that I've ever seen that's actually transitioned their essay from a stage 2, 3 forward. And they're in this room right now. It's Ayaka and Sochita. And I don't think it's any surprise that they've been a part of the LSAT Unplugged course for many months now, and that you're both TAs because you are very detail-oriented people. But I think what you've just described of that lift from the first draft to like stage 2, where some things are starting to be fixed. Every person I've ever worked with, that's too bold of me to say, but most people that I've worked with say, is it done? Can I turn it in? And it's really difficult to try to explain to someone that their story could be more refined.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think the same. I rarely have someone who comes in and says, I really want to make this the best essay that I can make it and get to stage 4, stage 5. They're really in that, like, maybe in the stage 3, and it's kind of like oh, I need to turn in my essay now sort of situation. And I have a lot of sympathy for that, because the essay writing process, there's no way to quantify it. There's, it's such a long process. Sorry, I'm trying to like zoom into this. So zoom in. Can I? Oh, okay, hold on. No, I think it's zoomed out. Why is it zooming out? hold on. Does that work? Okay. So it's so hard to quantify where your essay is in the process comparatively to the LSAT, right? You get a score every time you do a prep test. You're like, oh, I'm in the 150s. Oh, I got to a 160. That's a breakthrough. You're testing in the 170s. That's awesome. Like, that's so easy to see your progression. Whereas the essay, it's like, oh, no matter who I show it to, there's more edits to make, and they're huge edits. It's so much work on your side, and there's no right answer. So it's hard to see what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. And so I have a lot of sympathy for people who are like, oh, like, am I done yet? But a lot of times when you're asking that question, you're really not done. And it's a shame that a lot of people kind of stop there.
And I just want to point out, that literally an hour ago when I was speaking to the director of the admissions committee for Texas Tech University School of Law, she mentioned that there's a 20% rise in applicants since the pandemic started, where she meant from 1,100 essays, that's a normal cycle. And so if you are trying to rush your essay when there's 20% more applicants to a school that's not even a T14 can come on some rankings. It is a fantastic school, but some rankings are not calling it that. And I think that you're in dangerous waters.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's great insight. And thank you for sharing your experience from the interview. So kind of going back to like the red flags, if you're asking, am I done? I think that's a red flag. Like you don't really want to ask that. And also it's kind of rude to the people who are reading your essays. Alyssa and I were talking about that the other day. So yes, Sanchita, you're absolutely right. You're not done. Are you dreading another round of edits? Right. And I get it. It's hard. It's taxing. It's time consuming. I get it, but you're going to have to do it. Are you hesitating to show your essay to someone else because you're like, oh, I'm going to have to make another round of edits? So, do you feel hesitant, or you're cutting it close to your deadline and you're like, I got to turn it in. It's done. I don't know. So those are really red flags for me. Compared to the LSAT, I understand that the timing of your essay can be extended or shortened much more easily than the LSAT, where like the LSAT is like there's dates you have to sign up months in advance, and you're waiting for that score to come out. So there's some decision you have to make if you're taking the LSAT in the spring or in winter. Is that score going to come out early enough for you to apply to schools that cycle? Whereas the essays, you're like, okay, I can shorten the editing cycle. You can shorten, and people think that they can do this in a month. I think it takes a little bit more because it's so emotionally and like physically draining. But you really don't want to be cutting your process short just because of a deadline. In the chat, yeah, I agree. Absolutely agree, Alyssa. So conversely, how do you know when you're done with your essay? And this kind of echoes Alyssa's class from last week. If you're editing circle, you've sent your draft out, and that editing circle is giving you like generally consistent feedback. Like it's really good. There's minor edits, but overall it's a really strong essay. And that kind of feedback is really great. And I think that means that it's coming close. And if that is the overall feedback in general from your editing circle, if it's just one person saying that, they might just be like saying that, and not to say that your essay is not great, but there's people out there who are just going to say, oh yeah, it's great, right? And so you want to make sure you're getting that consistent feedback. Do you feel good about what you've written? A lot of times when you ask people who ask, am I done? And you ask back, do you feel good about what you've written? Not all of them say yes. So it's a lot of them will say, well, I put a lot of time into it, but that doesn't mean yes to this answer, to this question. So you really want to feel good about what you've written. And finally, the edits that you're actually doing to your essays, they're minor, right? They're word choice, sentence structure, you're adding a comma, you're capitalizing letters that you forgot to capitalize, like those small edits that you're making. And if that's really the edits that you're making consistently over the course of a week, then I think you're close. That being said, people always say you're never done with an essay, which I think is true. There's always something you can change, but when you're in that minor edits sort of space, I think there's a time to say, all right, this is good. This is great. This is awesome. We're good. Yeah, absolutely, Suchita. There's a time to take a break. And I would love to comment on the timing piece. So I have a little bit of a story to tell you all. So back when I was in college, I I graduated with a literature major. So a lot of it was like essay writing during exams and all of that. And I had a friend.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Did you say a literature
Yes.
major? Oh, sorry. Thank you so much for clarifying that. A car just went by and I'm like, what did she say?
Yeah, a literature major. Sorry. And our exams are all essays and all that, which is great. And I had a friend who, on our exams, when we got our grades back, his was 10 points less than mine, but we wrote the same, not the same essay, but we wrote about the same thing because we studied together, and we're like, yeah, we went over this, like the symbolism, all of that. And so he and I looked at our paper and we're like, I wonder what the difference is. And I was like, why don't you just go ask? Right. And he went back to the professor, and the professor reread the paper and said, actually, you're doing this is what I was looking for. And he made the score equal to mine. That's not the moral of the story, is not bias. The moral of the story is, depending on, the time of day that you read your essay, the mood that you're in, whether you're in a hurry or not, that's going to change how you perceive your own essay. And that,
I'm
yeah, go
hijacking
ahead.
this moment.
Yeah.
I'm hijacking this moment because I think that I just had a light bulb moment where we're all about to be like future lawyers or persuaders. I'm like, one might argue, sorry, it's so cheesy, but one might suggest though that what if the way in which you wrote your ideas was easier on the reader to digest? Because I've seen essays that are talking about sound topics and I've read it and I've come to you, Ayaka, and been like, why is this essay really hard for me to read? I'm like, this person has potential. They have a great story. They're definitely talking about something that I feel would, like, law school seems like the next possible steps, but I'm having a hard time getting through it. And so I don't know what his essay was of this person in the story, but what if you're talking about the same exact content, but the way in which you wrote it was a little bit easier on the reader?
Sure. And I think, so backing it up a little bit, the exam was more on, did you understand, and the symbolism in a story and all that. So like the content is really what he should have been graded on, not the style. I understand. So I will shift back to your question in a bit, but the point being, when you read your essay, or when you read back your essay, same with your editors, when they read the essay, you know, might change how they perceive it. So keep that in mind. If you feel like the critique you're getting back is not really accurate, ask questions and say, hey, like, what made you give that feedback? Can you show me where you're pointing to? And sometimes, and I've done this before, I was reading Gabby's essay and a couple months ago, and I was like, hey, I think this is like, blah blah blah, and she was like, well, can you point it out? And it's like, oh, actually no, this is fine. So the way we read the information can change. So really ask the questions that you want to ask. Now, Alyssa, to your point, ease of reading, yes, important. And I hope that we catch that in that stage 3 to 4 time stage, where we're like, okay, this is really hard to read. I know the story, but we're not getting a good picture of what's happening. But I think in the editing process, if your essay is not great and somebody isn't telling you that, then you might need to find a new editing circle or find more people to look at your essay. I don't know if I actually answered your question, Alyssa.
I think you did a really nice job protecting the other writer in the story of talking about that he should have just been graded on content. And I also love the overall point that you're making in regards to consistent feedback and asking follow-up questions if feedback is not consistent. And also the overall point of this particular class in terms of how to know when your essay is done is if it's receiving somewhat consistent feedback, right, or feedback that is consistent with your goals and what you know to be a strong essay, which there's lots of, we just led a class last week that's already on YouTube, and in terms of how to figure out if your essay is strong in it or not, and if it's going in the right direction. So there's lots of resources to figure that out. I do think I still like my point though, in terms of even if your content is like premium content and what you're saying makes sense, if you say it in a structure that is, and I'm making this up, I don't know him, but if you say it in a structure that's clunky or in a way that makes sense to you, but it's not as easy to understand for the reader, it could still be done better.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with that, where, you know, how we think of things in our head might not translate well in words. So I think having someone, and that may be one of those pointed questions that we talked about in a couple classes ago about, you know, when you send your essay out to be read by other people, ask that question proactively. Is this an essay that you can read with ease? Is it understandable? Is it clear? Right? And ask those questions, because it's important to ask those questions and get feedback. A lot of times you're going to get feedback, and Alyssa, you mentioned this before in a previous class, you're going to get feedback that's like, oh, it's good. I think it's great. Love it. Right. And that's it. And there's really no constructive feedback. What was good? You know, why did you feel like it was a good essay? Right. Even if it's all positive, we really want that feedback. So knowing when it's done is this balance, I understand, of like, yes, you could edit this essay forever. We don't have forever to get into law school. So that's kind of where it is. However, you want to get to at least stage 4, stage 5 in this cycle to before you really start saying, okay, it's the deadline, I need to turn this in. Go ahead, Sachita.
Oh, I was just gonna add to Alyssa's point. In that case of like when it's hard to read, would you both say that you know, if you break up each paragraph to read individually, will that make sense to you? I think in that case, you know, because you know, you talk about some people write and what they translate in their head might not be easier for other people to understand, you know, and I think breaking up like each paragraph to see whether that paragraph alone, say even if it's in the middle of your essay, would that make sense? And I think that that would be good for anyone who's trying to see, you know, whether their essay is somewhat going in the right direction.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's a great way to kind of make sure that each paragraph is worth it, right? It's taking up a couple hundred words in your word count. Is it worth those couple hundred words, right? And you know, I think we all know here the essay is actually shorter than you think, and it's it kind of sucks. So you know, because it's really hard to put your life or your life goals into 2 pages. It's really hard. So I think that's great advice. I've been in a situation where I was reading someone's essay and I was like, okay, what is this paragraph doing? And kind of talking through each paragraph. And they're like, well, this paragraph, you can't read it independently because you need to connect it to this one. And there's a lot of explanation going on. And I think if you're having someone read your essay and you need to explain a lot of it, you're not done. You're not there in terms of having a holistic essay, because your verbal explanation is filling in a lot of gaps in that essay. And I really think that's really a true test of, can your essay stand alone as a reflection of who you are? Yes, absolutely, Suchita. Your essay should speak for you.
I think that this is such a brilliant point. And again, so I wanted to bring up, and I'm coming hot fresh off from this interview that I just saw face to face, and it's Sean Adams. She's actually the assistant director for recruitment at Texas Tech University School of Law, and I mislabeled her earlier. But something she landed twice in the interview, which I think is very important. She spoke about it at the beginning, and then at the end, towards the end of the interview, almost an entire hour later, she wanted to make clear. She said, sorry, excuse the traffic. She landed that your application is all she knows about you. So if you leave something out, you bring up questions in a personal statement essay, or you have some sort of vague part of it that's sort of confusing. I've heard someone give a great piece of advice to have someone that knows you well look at your essay, and have someone who doesn't know you at all look at your essay. And if the person who doesn't know you at all is confused about any part, that's a red flag. You should most definitely take a look at that, and not have that verbal explanation of explain to that person and sort of walk away from that interaction maybe with like an attitude of like, well, they don't know me. That's the whole point. If somebody who doesn't know you has questions, that's, I don't want to say that's very bad, but that's very bad.
I think that's a beautiful point, and really you said it much more beautifully than I could have. Like, it really is the only picture that they have of you. Going back to the editing circles, really this is where you want to pick and choose the people who are reading your essays carefully. Close friends are good, but they've seen your life story, right? They've lived part of your life story as well. So what they know kind of fills in those blanks. Whereas someone who, you might not know too well, and this is a really great place to just, hand off an essay, and say, hey, Suchita, can you read my essay? And, do you get a better, we know each other, so maybe not the best person, but, if you can pick a random person in class and be like, hey, do you have 5 minutes to just read my essay and give me some feedback? And so finding someone that may not be in your inner circle, that may not know you too well, to read your essay and get some genuine feedback, I think that's valuable at this stage 4, stage 5 as well. And, there's always people out there who are like, oh, I know the former admissions officer for X, Y, and Z school, I'm going to have them review my essay. Well, if you bring them in a little too early, they're going to know part of your story as well. So that feedback, if you're really looking for like admissions officers feedback, that feedback becomes a little bit diluted because they know you, they've talked through editing your essay a couple times. So, really kind of think about who's around you, who's in your editing circle, and what way to, I don't want to say use people, but use people's talents and knowledge. I do find that people really pull in those former admission officers that they know a little bit too early in their process and have them look at first drafts. It's like, no, come on, they're valuable. So, really, that's kind of where my presentation part of today ends. I know, Suchita, you've been working on your essay for a while. Matt, I know I feel like you just took your test, I believe.
No, I've pushed it out to June, but it's coming, so this is good.
Okay. So this might be a little bit further out for you, Matt. I know I'm in the I'm dead center in stage 4. Alyssa, I know you're in stage 4 as well. Do we have any points of discussion or points of questions? I know we're a small group here and we all know each other. So, okay. If you're to send your essay to a lawyer to read, how good do you feel about this? And will you? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's always, Alyssa said it before. It's like, I have a lawyer friend at XYZ firm and I'm going to have him read it. And it's like, okay, pedal back a little bit. And I think even yes, so the lawyer has gone through the application process, they've gone through law school. The writing style, that is a personal statement or a diversity statement or an addendum, is really different from any sort of writing that you're going to do academically, professionally, as a lawyer. So do you really want that type of writer reading your essay? And is this person going to give you constructive feedback? I love what you said, Sachita. A lot of times constructive feedback is really hard for people to give, and the majority of people don't know how to give it. So really think about that. Not all lawyers are great people to ask to read your essay. If they had a kick-ass personal statement, maybe, but we don't know. So great point there. Any points of discussion or points of questions? Anything we want to dig deeper into? I know we talked about a lot, and I know I'm a talker, so.
I keep clicking on the link so I can zoom in, but so you've said it yourself. I'm pretty much in stage 4. So what that means for me is that the structure, I reworked the structure to make it easier to read. I also prioritized the central message a little bit more. Before I was sort of lagging to get to it. So I've prioritized the central message. I have gone into detail into each paragraph and made sure that each sentence had a point. If something was repetitive or too long, I cut it. So I've like, things have been on the cut floor. So I am in stage 4, but what's really interesting right now in terms of my essays is I am at that stage where I'm asking myself, like, what does every single detail to this story say about me? And like one detail can be like, okay, that person's a hard worker. Another one can be, okay, this person, it does extra research than what is maybe expected of her. Like another thing that I think that is like shows that I'm like I have a commitment ability, like long-term goals, long-term visions is something I can execute like super long, longer than a month on a personal statement. And I apologize to anybody who's thinking that that's a long time, but like we're talking about like decades of like one focus that it does show. But what's getting really nuanced is I keep asking myself, is this the most accurate picture of me? And so there's 2 ways to do it. Like show someone who knows you, show someone who doesn't know you. People who don't know me have seen it and reworked it, but I actually have not had someone who does know me read it and say, well, we're actually missing a big part of your personality. Like there's this one thing about you that shows nowhere up in the application. So that's currently where I'm at in terms of, if you were to read this personal statement, does that actually encompass who I am as a person? So that's my next steps. And I'm just kind of talking out loud right now.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think, and I'm not negating what you're saying. I'm more food for thought as an addition. Personally, I think the main essay, the personal statement, should show a couple sides of you, really big, important things about you. I don't think it needs to encompass everything because I don't think it can. But the big things, right, should be there. And I like to think I know you, Alyssa, and if I read your essay and I'm like, you're missing something big here, I think that's a pretty big thing that I'm going to bring up. But I feel a little bit okay of like dropping something that's, that's not the biggest thing about yourself, but it was impactful. Maybe you can talk about it in a diversity statement or, addenda or something else. But you're really like the personal statement, you really want to hit like your top 3 things, but beyond that, I think it gets a little bit too wide. So
I think that's great advice.
I could pick out a lot of things just out of from Alyssa being creative as a person and just how lively you are, like as a person, like your I imagine reading your essay, and I've read your essay before, I think when we started doing the writing process, I want to read it and scream like, that's Alyssa. That's just how, because you have such a big personality that I would love to see that on paper. Like when I read it, I'd be like, I feel like I just talked to Alyssa, because when you talk, when you speak, you're very friendly and outgoing and attentive. And I think, just seeing all of those in your essay will be great. But I haven't read your like newer edit essay, but those are just what I think will be great.
I think you both bring up great points. And I think what's interesting is that, like, if anybody's listening to this and they get nervous about like sending their essays to people, both of these people that just spoke to me right now have seen my writing, and you've also been in class with me for months. And I'm like, ooh, I'm a little bit nervous about showing you my newest edits. And so, something I did just hear, I was listening to YouTube videos earlier, and an admissions officer said, you want to give your essay to someone. These are their words, not mine, but they're like, you want to give your essay to someone who will make it bleed. And I was like, oh, sounds a little aggressive, but I understand what they mean. And if I come in it with that mindset in a good way, knowing I have a choice to implement the feedback or not, because I have a strong sense of what I'm doing with my overall application, I think it's all good to get more people to look at your essay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that. The other thing that I would kind of asterisk in that stage 4 is getting too bogged down in the details, and losing sight of like what we're supposed to do in that essay. So I've been in a situation where I was, helping someone with their essay, and I was like, okay, this is a structure, we need to go in this way. And it was a diversity statement. And they were talking about, this cultural value that they got out of their family. And how her proactiveness to help her family that is abroad is in essence of that culture. However, when you read back the whole essay, it's a very American thing to be like, I'm going to go back and like I'm not a lawyer, but I'm going to go back and help my family and, get them out of this situation. It's a very American thing to do. And I don't mean that in any sort of insulting way. It's very culturally, valuable. And you're saying one thing, but the action speaks another. And that got lost when we were looking at the details. And I was like, all right, we need to go back and kind of figure out where we lost that there. So you don't want to get in the details and stick to that. You really want to come back and look at it look at the whole thing, and then come back into the details and look at the whole and come back. So stage 4 is really that like calibration into the right essay and making it great. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I could have a conversation with all of you for like hours about essays. So
I just have a point that just like came to me right now. Just hearing you talk and hearing Alyssa talk. And by the way, I love all the steps all the stages that you have here. I absolutely love it, because I know, I feel like a lot of people don't realize how long and how many stages are in, writing this essays, right? Personal statement or diversity statement. I just want to point out that, so I feel like myself right now is in a stage of like stage 4, right? But when you get to the zoom out stage, which is like, you have all your applications, all the other parts, because before all of this, to be honest, and I come out and say it, I would probably just like finish all my applications, submit all my essay, and just send it in, right? Without looking at it as a whole. So my point being is that just the timeline, I guess, give yourself enough time for that zoom out stage 2 for your personal statement, diversity, and other essays that you may have for different schools. And, as an applicant, and for each application itself. You know what I mean? And I think it just came to me. I'm just like, wait, if I get to zoom out, I'm not done just yet. I still need to look at it and look at each application and the essays to see if it makes sense. So I just want to point that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that hammers the point home that like you really can't rush this process. Like, you know, there's 5 stages, and maybe when you're in stage, and there's no shame in going back to stage 4 and then bouncing back and forth between stage 5 and stage 4. You know, Alyssa knows this. I've bounced back and forth between stage 3 and stage 4 for a while before I got to like a draft that I was like, all right, like I think we're close. So beautiful point, and it really hammers home the time piece. Like you really want to give yourself the time and space to go through all these stages. You know, I understand it's a heavy lift, and it is. But it's really going to benefit you. You know, admissions officers, as far as, you know, I've seen all the interviews and all that, and it's just a lot of times they're like, yeah, sometimes a personal statement will turn the application into a yes. So, you know, these are important parts, and I know there's a lot of emphasis on the LSAT, a lot of emphasis on the GPA, but I think the essay really could help you in, you know, getting into the school that's really right for you. So I believe in this process. Alyssa believes in this process. I hope we got you on board. You know, happy to answer any questions or discuss specific things about your essay. But yay, so Cheetah's on board. Awesome. Yay, Matt too. We got everyone 100% on board. So yeah. Well, thank you all. Loved seeing your beautiful faces.
Awesome. Thank you, Ayaka. That was great.
Thank you, Ayaka. This is awesome. I'm excited to go back to mine and read it again.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks.
Of course. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.